Thanks so much. So I want to start this talk with a small disclaimer. Just want to be clear that there's no technical talk in this. It's about people and how we communicate. Part of the communication is technical, of course, but there's not going to be any code in this talk. The reason for that is because I'm talking about this. If you're in North America, you would recognize this. If you are a citizen of the internet, maybe as well. This is community. And today we're going to be talking about the Elixir community. That's the last joke in this talk. So 3 notes. First of all, I'm going to be talking about specific people's work, and so I want to apologize in advance. Sorry if I didn't mention your work. It's not because I hate you. I'm going to try to update this presentation as people suggest more things to be added. If you want to follow along with the slides, I put up the slides here. It's like a live link to the Google Docs, so it'll change over time as well. And you'll see throughout the talk that there are links that will be easy to type down. Using my URL, it's not meant to imply that I own the content that is being linked. It's just as a short URL, and I don't like bit.ly links. So my goals with the talk are to describe the Elixir community and help newcomers navigate it. My not goals, I don't want to talk about adoption today, not because adoption is not important. Of course, it's very important, but there already have been at least 1, maybe 2 talks about adoption at this conference, and it's just not my topic. I definitely don't want to prescribe a correct path for how people can get involved, and I don't intend for this to be conclusive or final. I think it should change over time as the community develops. The ways that people get involved with the community should also develop. So this is my talk, the Elixir community and how to get involved. It's going to be an exploration and a guide presented by me here today, Thursday, October 14th for ElixirConf. So this is me. My name is Andy. In English, I use they, them pronouns. I'm Vietnamese, but I was born, raised, currently living in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'm a hobby bassist. If you're in a meeting with me, you might see me holding a guitar or bass just to keep my hands busy so I'm not on a different website and I'm talking to you. And my background is in physics, so I'm doing better now. Thanks for asking. I have a quick plug about the company that I'm employed at. We do live streaming, it's called Firework, based in SF Bay. Video streaming, live streaming, e-commerce, serve hundreds of millions of users. The stack is pretty cool, Elixir, Next.js, iOS and Android. There's more specific tools for iOS and Android that I don't know about. I'm talking about this because we're hiring and I get a referral bonus. So do reach out if you are interested in writing Elixir full-time, writing React full-time. Let me know. So we're going to jump into the content. We're going to ask the question, what is the Elixir community? So there's 2 major sources of survey data that can be talked about, and I'm not going to present all of them. I'm just going to briefly talk about first the Stack Overflow survey from 2021. That's earlier this year. So this was a big survey, not just for the Elixir community, and over 80,000 people replied. From this data, it came out that Elixir is still one of the top 40 languages in popularity. It's been increasing every year, stepping up the ranks, but I don't think it's ever reached the top 30. And part of the data says that Elixir and Erlang developers are the 3rd highest paid, which is not necessarily a good thing, and I'll get to that in a second. So the other recent piece of data that's interesting to look at is the Elixir community survey. So this was run by Brian Cardarella in 2020. It got about 3,000 responses, which is great. Talked about adoption, companies, tools. It showed that our community skews senior. There's actually really poor gender diversity. And most of the respondents were from the US. And I noted in the previous slide that it's not necessarily a good thing that the salary ranges are high. And it's the same point here that the community skews senior. It implies that the community is growing slowly, because if we had high growth, that would mean lots of juniors. So it's something for us to look out for. So the reason that the US skew to the Elixir community survey is not indicative of the community, is that we're actually all over. So there's a list of meetups on the Elixir wiki on GitHub, and this is a map generated from that. It's, as far as I know, I apologize if I'm missing some, or some of these are now defunct, but you can see that pretty much all around the world there are people using Elixir and enjoying it enough that they want to talk to other people in their area about it. This is an image sent to me by a new friend in Japan who's with the Elixir community in Fukuoka, which is the southwestmost province there. I think it's a province. This is huge. This is a huge community with 26 different meetups, and each of them meets around once a month. And I didn't know anything about this until I spoke to him. So it's hopefully eye-opening that there's a lot of community, a lot of communication that, interestingly, we might not even know about. In 2019, Adolfo Niso presented a talk to a conference called Elixir Brazil. He presents in Portuguese, but he has his slides also in English. And that presentation was a theoretical formalization of the Elixir community as something called a community of practice. So there's certain concepts under the rubric of the community of practice about ways to look at individuals, organizations, events. So if you're interested, I suggest I'm going to add a link to that later in my slideshow. So this is the meat of my presentation. This is how people in the Elixir community communicate with each other. So we'll look at interactive forms of communication and also content, which is more one-directional, not strictly one-directional. So where do we talk to each other? I'm going to start with open source. I think it's a really important part of our community, and it's hard to capture all of it, but the spirit of open source is very much alive in the Elixir community. There's tons of different projects, different use cases, and that's important because each of these represents a different entry point into the community. So the language itself is open source. Of course, Phoenix, the web framework, is probably one of the most popular libraries in Elixir, but there's also Nerves for embedded, Membrane for multimedia processing, NX for big math, Lumen, which is Elixir and Erlang on WebAssembly, and Scenic, which is an IoT UI framework. And it's important for our community to know about these things because if you have a friend who's doing embedded and they're really frustrated with C++, I presume everybody who writes C++ is, maybe they should know about Nerves, and maybe it's an entry point into the community. I also have a personal shout out here for Paper Cups. It's an open source alternative to Intercom, and it's how I got involved with Elixir. I also think that the ERLF, or the EEF, is very important, the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation. So this is a formal organization, a nonprofit in the US. It's structured into working groups, it has a board. They offer financial support, so stipends, as well as other kinds of support for Erlang, Elixir, and other Beam community initiatives. And those working groups, they meet regularly online. They talk about community issues as well as ecosystem. So both technical, like security and infrastructure, and social things like education and adoption. So you can go to their website, it's erlf.org. And if you want to see the list of working groups, it's erlf.org/WG. I think it's really important because it's a formal organization, and that's different than, meetups are less formal. They're still important. That's I'm just going to move there. Okay. Companies can also, it's interesting if a company is large enough, even if it's not based around Elixir in the first place, if the company is using Elixir, then those developers constitute a small community. And so it's useful for other people as well, because companies which have capital can be involved in open sourcing their own code, can contribute to other open source. They can help produce content like tech blogs or podcasts. They can host meetups, sponsor conferences, and they can even sponsor open source development and the ERLF. So there's a category of connecting with people that is more direct, and so meetups and conferences kind of go together here. So meetups are usually local to a city. They're more casual, more frequent, and there's different forms. They go in talks or lightning talks. Sometimes there's pub nights and hack nights. Sometimes it's just a study group or a reading group for books. On the other hand, conferences are usually more larger in geographical scope. I think that during the pandemic, most of these have gone online, but recently in the past few months, they've started to open up into in-person or hybrid events. And the cool thing about these is that they're worldwide. So the one that we're sitting in today is ElixirConf US, but there's also ElixirConf for Japan, Mexico, Latin America, Europe, and Africa. There's a full list of meetups as well. That's the map that I showed you earlier. Those are also worldwide. So the Elixir forum is an important part of the community. It's a hub for discussion with different subforums for different parts of the ecosystem. There's job postings, meetup discussions, lists of books, and so on. So there's lots of content there. And it's a relatively unique feature of the Elixir community because it's much more active than Stack Overflow is. And in some ways, it can close us off from Stack Overflow and other developers. But personally, I like it. I like to have a centralized place for discussion. There's also a few chat apps that have Elixir communities. So Slack and Discord are kind of comparable. They're large multi-channel discussion hubs. If you're interested, you can type in these invite links. I just generated them from the Slack and the Discord. There's IRC, which I personally haven't used in a long time, but I believe this IRC community is active, and it's more of a group messaging system. And so is Telegram. Telegram is a messaging app with many different groups, so it's different than IRC, which has a central group. And the Telegram groups are actually listed in a blog post that Adelpho maintains, which I've linked here. There's also a category that I just called social media. So Twitter is interesting because individuals or collectives of people, so companies, podcasts, content creation groups, post in their own space under their own name. And everybody who uses Twitter opts into following specific accounts or to following the general hashtag #MyElixirStatus. There's also a Beam one that's, I think, we beam together. On the other hand, Reddit is a more centralized place. So there's a central area called a subreddit, and everybody posts into this place, and posts can be upvoted or downvoted, depending on whether they're interesting or funny or whatever. There's also 2 Google groups that are important to the Elixir community. One of them is for proposals to the Elixir language itself, and the other one is for announcements of changes to the Elixir language itself. So both of these move pretty slowly. Like there's a post every couple of months, I think. But they're there and they're important. The next section, we'll talk about content in the community. So I said that these are more directional, but not completely, because, somebody writes a book, they don't disappear. They're still there, and they can be tweeted at or messaged on the Slack about content that's missing, or if you have questions about the content. So take the category of content with a grain of salt. So I started with books. It's something that people say about the Elixir community a lot, is that there's a notable number of books in the community. By my count, there's over 50. So these books are put out under a few different publishers, but there's some major ones. Most notably Manning, which is the books that look like the book on the left with usually a person with an interesting outfit. Prog, which has the Programming Elixir, Programming Phoenix, and so on, as well as other books. O'Reilly, which is well known for tons of technical books. And I wrote Elf published books. No, it's supposed to say self-published. There's a whole section of the forum that's devoted to this, to listing the books. So you can check out the link there. That's where I got the number of over 50 books. There's also a few podcasts and radio shows in the community. So this is a list of, I'm not sure if all of them are active, and I'm sure I missed some of them, but the ones that, like, personally, they come out at such a pace that it's possible for me to listen to all of them. So I'm thinking Elixir, Beam Radio, Elixir Wizards, Elixir Outlaws. Those are, I think, and Elixir Mix are the major ones that have been going for quite a while. Elixir Newbie is a new one, ironically, I guess. And it's somebody sort of going through their journey of being new to Elixir themselves. And it's all on YouTube. It's pretty cool. I put changelog there because it's not a specifically Elixir community podcast, but they've notably had people like Jose Valim and Chris McCord as guests pretty early in the game. So it's cool. And I also want to note that there's a podcast in Portuguese. I'm not sure people always say Brazilian Portuguese, but it's by some friends in Brazil. That's a link to it. And really cool thing that I found out about is that there's a Twitter Spaces radio show in Japanese. So I've linked to that as well. There's also a few newsletters in the community. This list actually comes directly from Adolfo's blog post about newsletters. So he has a different post about that. So Elixir Radar was a weekly newsletter by Platform Tech. I'm not sure if it's still happening because I believe that company was acquired. There's Elixir Digest, Awesome Elixir, Elixir Weekly, Vitamin E. The last one I think Vitamin E is relatively infrequent with its posts. And there's a new Nerves newsletter. So in terms of blogs and websites, I think this is the kind of content that there's the most of, or rather there's the least central kind of places for them. So instead of listing like every individual person's blogs, what I have here is Lars has an aggregator called beambloggers.com, and there's a whole bunch of blogs that all go into a feed there. But there's also individual companies' technical blogs. So these are some of them that I've come across just Googling things, and they solved the problem that I also need to solve. There's an Erlang and Elixir like official blog. Each of these, they have fewer posts, but it's important that they're official blogs. And I also want to talk about, there's some important like educational websites that people can look at. So Elixir School, I might have forgotten to list, what's it called? I almost had it, but yeah. Exercism. I really like Exercism's like online exercises. And so I didn't have a category for educational content, which I think I should have, because there's a whole bunch of course creators, training companies, and so on that are important to talk about. And I will be sure to update these slides with that list. And that's my list of the Elixir community as it stands. And so having seen that list, it's a lot of stuff. How can you get involved? So remember, this is not meant to be prescriptive. I'm not telling you what to do exactly. I'm telling you things that you could do. And personally, I think that one of the most important things you can do is to find a balance between technical and social. It's definitely not about choosing one or the other, unless you really want to never talk to anybody, but that probably won't work out because the community is great and it's useful to talk to people. And of course, it won't be useful to only have a social interaction with the community because it's based around the technical. So if you're interested in getting involved on the technical side, you should learn the language, follow the language guide on elixirlang.org. There's the community-created courses that I mentioned. There's a few of the major open source projects that I listed earlier. You should definitely check those out and do some exercises, exercism.io, before, maybe not before, but at the same time as the social side. So you can make an account on some of the places that people hang out to discuss online, Slack, Discord, or Elixir Forum. Or if online is not your thing, you can try to find a local meetup, attend a local conference. And I know that one of the biggest problems with joining conferences is that there isn't a conference, or joining meetups is that there isn't a meetup nearby. So it really is an option to start a meetup. And if you have an idea to start a meetup, you should post in the Elixir forum. You can offer help on GitHub. So this is where technical and social mingle, because it's a really good way to get involved and start to meet people and see what are the technical problems and what are the needs in the community. And overall, what's important is to find ways to talk to people in a way that makes you feel comfortable, because if it feels bad or weird, you won't do it. So finding the way that feels good will be important. And this is my last slide. I could have gotten, I'm sure, 100 or 1,000 quotes about this, but I tried to ask people what the community means to you. And it's one thing to hear positive responses, but when you hear very similar positive responses from each person, that their people are positive, they're supportive, they're welcoming, I think it really reflects well on the community. And I think the fact that every person who's involved says that other people are so welcoming makes them want to be welcoming, and hopefully we have a positive feedback loop. So most of all, remember the human. Of course, it's a very technical topic, but there are people behind it. There are people working on it with you. And if we're working together, it'll be a better time for everyone. That's it. Thanks everyone for joining. This is my email if you want to help me get a referral bonus at work. Or this is how you can find me on Twitter. And again, those are the slides.